It's a video request. Somebody asked me to make a video about martial arts and its relation to hip hop. Now, I think martial arts, the meaning of it is a very deep meaning that is hard to grasp the meaning. It's an experience that you have to have in order to really deeply understand what it really means to be a martial artist or to practice the martial arts. And I think the same thing goes with hip hop. The meaning is something that's you got to experience it in order to deeply understand what it means, hip hop really means. But before making this video, I want to quickly look at the definition of it in the dictionary and what they said it was. And their generic definition was, okay, a combination of like rap music, graffiti, and breakdancing, which I think is extremely very generic, and I don't think that that's the real meaning of it. It's kind of like if you look up the definition of kung fu, you just see like, oh, a Chinese fighting system. That's not even the real definition of it. The real definition of kung fu is like inner discipline to like towards perfection. The definition of the meaning of kung fu came from Confucius. Basically he was a scholar, and he was basically always, he was an intellectual. He was always bettering himself, and the meaning, the word kung fu came from Confucius, just like kung fu, Confucius. Okay, so the definition that's in the dictionary is not even correct. So if you try to look up the definition of martial arts in the dictionary, they don't even know what they're talking about. So a lot of times, like, you cannot look towards the dictionary towards getting the real meaning of what a word is supposed to represent. So I'm gonna basically share my thoughts on what it really means, what hip hop really means, and what martial arts really means. For me, I even got into what I consider hip hop from my experiences is my gravitation towards my natural attraction towards Tupac. I was introduced to Tupac before I was even introduced to Bruce Lee. I know when I was younger, my dad was watching Bruce Lee movies, but I didn't really think much of it. I watched the movies a little bit, but I didn't really get to know Bruce Lee until like later on in my life, like around like college times, okay, when I started reading his books. But I started to get to know Tupac even before that. I started to get introduced to Tupac as early as junior high. Okay, like it was I hung around with a lot of African Americans, throughout my younger years, and they introduced me to Tupac and other rap artists. But it was mainly just Tupac that's been influencing me during that time, and after that time, and even now. He's like one of the only artists that I really am consistent with as far as like listening to his music. And he has a lot of music, so I listen to his music a lot. I've seen the documentaries with them. I've seen interviews with them. So I know more about his life than just an average artist. Okay, like he was very impactful in my life, as like Bruce Lee has been impactful. I see a lot of similarities. To me, Tupac was representing hip hop to the fullest. As far as everybody else is concerned, and them trying to say that they're hip hop, I think they're not expressing it to the level that Tupac was expressing it. Hip hop to me is like being real. Like he was a real artist. He was a real hip hop artist. He wasn't just like, okay, in it for the money, and hey, I'm just gonna make the music just to make this money, and tell you what you want to hear and just feed into the system. No, like Tupac was basically rebelling against the system, and expressing himself authentically, originally, with much origination, and to me there's a lot of similarities between Tupac and Bruce Lee, and I think that's the main reasons why I'm so much drawn towards them. And to me, it's Bruce Lee that's representing real martial arts, as far as like somebody that reached the level of fame that everybody knows. It's Bruce Lee's, like, single-handedly is representing the real martial arts, whereas like almost everybody else out there is not representing it. There might be people representing it that are hidden, but he's represented it, you know, in a worldwide scale where he gained that national fame, the international fame, and same thing with Tupac, you know, um, representing like real hip hop. So to me, when I think about the word martial arts, I think that really Tupac was almost considered to me like almost like a real martial artist, you know, because Tupac was like Bruce Lee would fight back like non-verbally through his body movements, you know, through punching and kicking and expressing, you know, himself creatively through his body. Tupac was expressing himself verbally, you know, so it's like the martial art expression on a verbal level, that was Tupac. And then on a non-verbal level, that was Bruce Lee, okay? But even with the verbal, I mean, with Bruce Lee, you would see his unique like way of breathing and his unique like cat like sounds. That was unique to him, so that was part of his verbal expression. Tupac had some of the non-verbal expression, you know, in his music videos. You see the way that he dances, the way he moves, his hand gestures. So Tupac was maybe 90% verbal, 10% non-verbal. Bruce Lee's like the opposite, you know, 90% non-verbal, 10% verbal. But they were expressing like different aspects of the martial arts. And they were almost like the masters of their expression, of their craft. Okay, so Tupac, the martial arts and hip hop is representing to me like the minority struggle, the struggle of being oppressed. Okay, that's clearly what hip hop's all about, where it's like, you know, the blacks go through so much oppression here, so much racism, so much discrimination, that hip hop was like their way of like creatively fighting back. You know, um, rap music, breakdancing, graffiti are all non-physically violent ways of fighting back, because they know that fighting back physically would bring them, um, they couldn't do it because you're talking about the police, you're talking about the government, where they'll just crush you. So they can't physically fight back. They can't punch and kick. They can't like use guns. I mean, you're talking about a whole system that's oppressing a group of people through racism and discrimination. You know, you can't really physically outpower the authority. So the way that they fight back is through creativity. So like hip hop, even though Tupac's my favorite, other hip hop artists would be considered maybe like NWA, where that movie that I saw recently, you know, with Dr. Dre and Ice Cube and Eazy-E, making those controversial rap songs were their verbal way of fighting back. Because they know when the police are right in front of their face, they can't fight back the police, otherwise the police would just kill them. So hip hop in a way is almost like an evolved expression of the martial arts, in where they learned to harness that physical expression of violence and turn it into something non-physical. They turn that expression into fighting back through verbally, through rap music, and they also fought back through the graffiti, which is basically like painting. You know, it's like fighting back through pictures. You know, instead of like paintbrushes, they use aerosol cans. You know, like spray painting cans, and that's the way of like fighting back with art. Breakdancing is just a non-violent way of expressing this harnessed energy. You know, so almost like breakdance is almost like an evolved version of the martial arts, because like the physical combative aspect of the martial arts can only take you so far before the authority steps in and be like, you know, if you punch and kick at me, which are the police, then we're just gonna shoot and kill you. So you're not allowed to punch and kick us. You know, you're not allowed to physically fight back. So then what ends up happening is the martial artist has to be less aggressive with their expression, and breakdancing in a way is an expression of like that non-physically violent expression that's turned into an art form, a dance. You see the evolved expression of the martial arts. A lot of it has turned into a way of dance. Even the art of capoeira, it is pretty much more of a dancing art form of the martial arts. And you see a lot of the Chinese martial arts, the Chinese kung fu, a lot of it is like dance movements, like wushu. Like they'll compete in the Olympics with like, what Jet Li used to do. It'd be just like a big dance with combat moves inside the dance, and they'll be doing all sorts of like kicks and punches and splits and flips, and it's like that's pretty much very similar to the breakdancing, and that's their evolved version of the martial arts, because as time passes, they start to see that the physical aggressive expression in the martial arts is no longer practical because of the firearms, because of the guns. The police, the government will come in and overpower all martial artists with their weapons. So if martial artists are not going to use weapons themselves, then they're clearly at a disadvantage, and they need to surrender and not physically fight back, but fight back through creative ways, like fighting back like what Martin Luther King Jr. would fight back verbally. Malcolm X would fight back verbally, through protesting. Okay, and Tupac is another version of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. He was fighting back verbally through rap music, through art. So Tupac drew a lot of inspiration from Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. and to create his own way of protest through creativity. Okay, Bruce Lee was a martial artist that would fight back through film and make his statements through the creation of film and choreographed fight scenes, and just like a physical expression of fighting back. Hip hop and martial arts is all about fighting back, like basically fighting against corruption. Hip hop is about fighting against corruption, and the corrupted authority. You can't physically fight back the corrupted authority because they have all the weapons in the world. They got all the nuclear weapons. They got the firearms. They got bulletproof vests. They got bombs. They got whatever they have to fight you with, and you just can't fight back physically. So what you got to do is you got to fight back through art. Bruce Lee would fight back by, we can make a movie to protest what is wrong in this society. Tupac would be like, okay, we could fight back by making music, rap music, to fight, to verbally fight back against this corruption. Okay, so I see that hip hop and martial arts is almost one thing to me, where it's like it's just a different way of expressing yourself as an artist. Some artists, like Bruce Lee, he was a master of like his physical expression. Tupac is like more of a master of his verbal expression through rhyming and poetry, music. Okay, and then there's gonna be people out there that have more like the Bruce Lee expression, which is a little bit more, you can see the practicality in his movements. And then you got breakdancers where it's not even about fighting anymore, it's just about, expressing themselves creatively through seeing what they could do with their entire body and demonstrating that in an artful way. Calligraphy is known in the Chinese martial arts as a big part of it, where this is part of your development as a martial artist. Developing your ability to practice calligraphy is like a painting, it's like an art, and that is similar to what graffiti is, what they call graffiti. Is basically, it's like an art, of drawing pictures. Calligraphy is basically drawing a picture, and graffiti is drawing pictures, and it doesn't matter if you use, a pencil, a paintbrush, or spray paint. It's an expression of art. So I see a lot of similarities, and I'm drawn to both artists for a reason. They're both real people. Tupac was representing the realness in hip hop, and then Bruce Lee was representing the realness in martial arts. And it's not that everybody that claims hip hop is real, because the stuff out there nowadays, I don't consider that stuff real. I think a lot of it is just um, overrun, overtaken by the industry, and these artists are just basically, they're not even artists. They're just basically being used as puppets by the industry. The industry is just using these people as puppets and labeling them as artists when they're not really artists. They just tell the artists, okay, you do this, you do that, you make this song about this. These are the lyrics that you're gonna rap about. You're gonna be pushing our products. You're not gonna be expressing your soul. You're not gonna be expressing your spirit. You're not gonna be standing up for any political change. You're not gonna be trying to educate the people. You're just gonna make this music to make money for us. Those are not artists. Those are not real people to me. Tupac was one of the very few that I would consider the real. Um, as far as martial artists are concerned, Bruce Lee would be the only one of the very few that I would consider the real. I mean, Jet Li, I would consider him real as well, but there's not that many real people out there, and when I when I discover these people, I connect with them, and I connect with them for a reason. And there's very few. I mean, I could literally name them, you know, because there's so few of them. My biggest influences: Tupac, Bruce Lee, Osho, Buddha, Lao Tzu, J. Krishnamurti. I mean, these are just people that were just real people, and you need a real person in order to represent, you know, the real hip hop, the real martial arts. As far as hip hop is concerned, I don't even know who else I would consider that real. You know what I mean? Like, I can only recommend Tupac. And that's all. You know what I mean? But people that are interested in learning more about hip hop, I recommend for them to listen to all of Tupac's music, to watch Resurrection, to watch all the documentaries out there on Tupac, and his life, and you know just learn about him. You know, and for the people that want to learn about the real martial arts, I recommend to watch all the Bruce Lee's movies, read all his books, and then basically see the similarities between both artists. And it's almost like Tupac was almost like an American version of a Bruce Lee, you know, um, an Americanized version of a Bruce Lee. Tupac was wearing bulletproof vests. He was going to the gun range. He was using guns. He even shot back at the police when the police were doing him wrong. He would fight back in the courts when they would arrest him wrongfully. He even ended up going to jail. Tupac ended up getting shot 5 times and then living to talk about it and rap about it. And then he ended up dying by the gun. I mean, Tupac lived the most real life that you can. Even Bruce Lee didn't die by the gun. Bruce Lee didn't, die in a fist fight. Bruce Lee just died in his bed. You know what I mean? Bruce Lee was an actor. You know what I mean? Bruce Lee never even got shot. And Tupac experienced so much of like this lifestyle of being on the streets and dealing with real street violence, like real people coming after trying to hurt him and kill him. And Bruce Lee didn't even have to go through all of that. So Tupac even had more of a realness in his expression, as far as like real, like realness. Like that's as real as it possibly can get. He got shot 5 times, he lived, and then he ended up dying by the gun. I mean, that's just the realest it could get. It's just like, it's like a soldier who's not just an actor who's like in Saving Private Ryan and winning an Academy Award for being in a movie. No, that this is like a real soldier going to war for real and then dying in war. I mean, it doesn't get more real than that, and that's kind of like what Tupac, he was like a real, not just like a real soldier, like a real hip-hop artist that was representing the real. and Tupac, and Bruce Lee was another one of them, you know. So you don't really encounter that often. You got these so-called artists nowadays. They're not real. They're just like pretending. They're pretenders. They want to pretend like they're rough. They want to pretend like they're tough, and that it's all an act. An act for them to make money, to get famous. They don't really go through struggles like the way Tupac was going through struggles and Bruce Lee was going through struggles. I mean, these people, they have millions of dollars living in mansions. Like, how much struggle are they actually going through? How much could they even rap about? How could you rap about struggle when you're living in a mansion and everything's being paid for, everything's done for you? Tupac's music had like a real element of struggle in it through the things that he's went through the things that he's seen, you know, and experienced, grown up in poverty and living in poverty, not having his father around, and basically being raised by his mother, and dealing with enemies and hatred and jealousy and people backstabbing him, and getting shot, 5 times, and surviving that, and then just basically trying to decipher to see who was his enemies and who were his friends, and then never having anybody that he could really trust. I mean, just going through all this struggle gave him things to really have something to rap about that had some meaning. But these artists, so-called artists nowadays, they don't have any of those struggles. They're just basically living lives like the rich and famous with no struggles. There's no substance in anything that they could even rap about. All they rap about is just how much money they make, bragging about what type of cars that they drive, and just a bunch of nonsense. These are not hip hop. This is not hip hop. Hip hop is about struggle. Hip hop is about like overcoming that struggle through hard work. And these people, they're not artists to me. They're not representing real hip hop, even though they might try to claim that, but they're not representing it. And that's what I see, and that's all I gotta say.